Good to be together this morning. Thanks for joining us and our Morning Moments video. We also have Tuesdays and Thursdays a Morning Moments podcast we send out and email lessons and stories and thoughts. And then we're about to start at the end of summer. We're going to start a family podcast. And people have asked about it. And so we're going to start a separate podcast, and it's just going to be audio, but lessons on marriage, lessons on training and raising children, lessons on keeping alive in a world that wants to ruin you. And so I'll tell you more about that later on. We do have the first weekend in the first Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 days in October. We've got a family conference. We'll have lessons on child rearing, marriage. We'll have special things for teenagers and children. A couple of guest speakers will be in. It's going to be a good time together, a good time to focus on the home. And as if you've been around, you've heard me say often that the home is the foundation of the country and the church. And if without the home, our countries are shot. And that's why, of course, the devil works so hard at messing up our homes and messing up our churches. Today, in regard to that, I was going to read a note for you out of Mike Ray's book, If They Can Make It, You Can Too. 180 short biographies, just a paragraph or a page or two on different people. And this is a note on Marlene Evans. And we have this end of summer in through fall and winter. We're taking some time here and there and talking about our fundamental roots. Where do we come from? Who are we? What the Pharaoh messed up on in Egypt was a Pharaoh rose to power who didn't know who Joseph was. And because he didn't know who Joseph was, that Joseph was responsible for saving the country and on, because he didn't know his true history, he made the most tragic mistakes he could possibly make and ended up destroying the nation of Egypt. Well, that's what's going on in America. There's an intentional attack on the history of America, spiritually as well as historically and philosophically. And so if we don't know our history, if we don't know where we came from and who we are, why we believe what we believe, we can't get that straight, we're going to be available for every kind of foolish thought imaginable. Well, Marlene Evans, many of you that are older in our church, you heard Mrs. Evans. She spoke many times at our church. Just what a lady. She's just an amazing lady is all I can say. And how blessed I was to sit in her classes in Bible college, but also to hear her speak out and around the country. I'm just going to read a couple of pages Brother Ray wrote. Born in 1933, she gave Christian womanhood a real title. She had a big personality full of ideas and a loud voice. She was just an amazing lady. In World War II, she thought she and her friends needed to be able to jump out of airplanes and crawl through tunnels, and she and her commandos prepared. She even tried to have her own circus to raise money for the war. She never thought herself to be dainty. It just wasn't her. By 7th grade, she was taller than average, caused a lot of ribbing from her classmates, but because of that, she learned to never look down on others. Instead, she attracted them and made them feel special. In her high school band, she played clarinet. She was taught a love of nature as a youth and held on to that all through her life. Her stories about red birds and things like that, if you knew her very well, they're special things. She was forever changed at a Sword of the Lord conference where she met John R. Rice, Joe Henry Hankins, and Bob Jones Sr. She thought of nothing but attending Bob Jones College. That's where she met her husband. She had come out of her shell being a girls' dormitory supervisor. She and her husband were then able to adopt a son and a daughter. Her husband, Wendell Evans, was a farm boy from Iowa. And here she and he got together, and they were countrymen. He talked about sniffing kerosene and smoking corn husks. And he was brilliant, had earned PhD, and they were both brilliant, scholarly, mental brilliance, but they had passion for life. And her husband also has spoken at our church many times. Marlene Evans began working for Pastor Lee Robertson in Tennessee at Highland Park Baptist Church. They were heavily involved in leading ministries, But her most productive time was working at First Baptist Church in Hammond under Dr. Jack Hiles, where she developed the Christian Womanhood Spectaculars and her magazine. She would fill that 5,000-seat auditorium with ladies, just fill it up, and it would be exciting. And what an incredible lady. She began to be an in-demand speaker, taught women to serve, to get along, to have godly standards, to rear godly children, to be great wives. She authored 17 books, and she taught people to have fun. She was amazing. Mike Ray writing that his heart was knit to her as she came to the ladies' conferences there in Napa. She's one. She said regularly, "Don't send me flowers when I'm dead. Send them while I'm alive." She developed stage 4 ovarian cancer, and that's when she authored the book, Cancer, My Enemy, My Friend, and another book, There's Life After Cancer. She often said, "I decided I will live until I die." She lost all her hair from all the treatments, and one of the things is, I'll never forget, she was behind our present auditorium. We had a tent up, and the lady speakers don't really, they prefer to not have men in there when they're speaking. They just feel like it's not their job to speak to men and to teach men. But I'd hang out, with a tent. You can be a long ways away and still hear. And I was up toward the building one day, the Sunday school building, and she was speaking, and I don't know what she was doing, but she laid down on the platform on one elbow, and she took her wig off and was saying something about, "Look, it's going to be okay. Hang in there. You can do it." And her bald head shining. And Mike Ray said there were times she'd take her wig off and throw it into the crowd. She's a lady who was not going to be conquered by her circumstances, but was going to take her circumstances and use them for the glory of God. She taught in college. She taught speech class. I remember Steve and Sharon Sandberg. We met them knocking on doors. They became very faithful here, very dear friends of ours. And then after graduating from Hyles Anderson College, Steve and Sharon went and started a Baptist church up in Victorville. His health gave way, and they came back and joined our church and served here for some time before Sharon went to heaven. And Steve's now moved to Florida, where his daughter is serving in a really good church there. But I remember Mrs. Evans had a speech class, and she taught you the goal was to lose yourself. If you'll forget about yourself, you can be an interesting speaker, and just get over you. You're not the center of everything. And I remember Steve came. One of the assignments was teach. You're supposed to bring a speech on instruction, how to do something. Well, Steve got his wife to come in a full gorilla outfit, and his speech was a message. His speech he gave was how to train your gorilla. And he had his wife up there, and Mrs. Evans, of course, just ate that up. And the fun that she taught us to have, she taught us to make sure that ministry was fun, and preaching was fun, and teaching the Word of God was fun. This stuffed shirt, boring teaching, there's no place for that. And Mrs. Evans, what a heroine. She went to heaven at the age of 67 after a 19-year battle with stage 4 ovarian cancer, constantly a patient at Mayo Clinic. A great book was called Marlene Evans, a biography by Jane Grafton. A great book. If you ever want to pick that up, you can find it. What a wonderful lady Marlene Evans was. She is a part of our generation of fundamental Baptist Christianity. She's the one who first introduced modesty and dress standards to our ladies in an instructional manner, because she has a message she teaches ladies called The 7 Sins of a Christian Woman. And I was young. I was 24, my wife 22. We started the church, and we had standards, but we weren't sure when and how to present them. But I always had a lending table. I wanted people to know who we were. And so we had books and cassettes back in the old days when you had cassettes. And so we had books and cassettes, and they just borrowed them. We lost hundreds and hundreds of messages and books. But I wanted people to know, you get these books so they knew who we were and what we believed and who we affiliated with and what our backgrounds were. A lot of Sword of the Lord books, a lot of books by John R. Rice and Lee Robertson in that era, Bob Jones Sr., that old crowd of godly older men, of course, Dr. Hiles. And I put ladies' messages out there, and one of them was Marlene Evans' 7 Sins of a Christian Woman. I put that out on the table after just a month or two of having our church, and she taught in there, one of the sins of a Christian woman is immodesty, just to inappropriately revealing yourself. And it's a pretty blunt sermon on the right dress. And, and I've slowly, little by little, put out different sermons because I knew people were listening to these. And next week, a couple of our ladies came to church, and I heard them whispering, "You think the pastor believes that?" And nobody asked me, so I didn't have to say. But Mrs. Evans, the first one to begin teaching our ladies that modesty is a biblical term. Modest apparel is a biblical term. And there is a woman that dresses with the attire of a harlot, Proverbs chapter 7. And it's in the scriptures. You can't deny it. And what a blessing. And I hope you that know her won't forget her, and you that don't know her, get her books. She wrote good books, Redbirds and something or other. She had a Christian Womanhood paper, and I would read that. The only papers I got was Dennis Coral's Revival Fires and the NRA, National Rifle Association magazine, and then Mrs. Evans, Christian Womanhood. She's just a great writer, but great people. And we're hurting in America for greatness. My wife doesn't listen to these, so I can say this. You that know my wife, you have the privilege of being in the presence of philosophical greatness. She knows what she believes. She communicates it. She's got her philosophies, the why. It's not just what we're supposed to do, it's why. It's how do you handle it, and how do you go around this, and how do you deal with this, and grab what you can from Mrs. Goddard. She's got a lot on the ball. Philippians chapter 4:8, just going to take a moment and throw out a couple of things. Philippians 4:8 tells us what we should be thinking about. And he says, whatsoever things are, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, and I'm not sure I can find Philippians while I'm quoting it. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest. There's 8 things. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. These 8 things he puts there. And he says in verse 9, those things which you have both learned and received and heard and seen in me do, and the God of peace shall be with you. So this peace, this rest, this fulfillment comes when you get your thinking right. And it's so vital. And there's so much in the Bible on our meditations. But recently, a friend of mine, a good man, a pastor of a very good church, he called me and actually sent a text that got it started. But he and I had been talking, and then he sent me a text and asked a couple of things. But he was asking about dealing with, he just felt like he hadn't quite achieved what he should have achieved, and maybe a little discouraged, a little melancholy. And he wanted to know what I could suggest. And I didn't answer right away. This is a good man, this is a godly man, a man that I could have gotten advice from. And so I thought a little bit. The Bible says, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. And a lot of Christians are too fast to talk. They think they know all the answers. Well, I'll tell you, God will humble you. And God will bring you to your knees where you've got no answers. And I grieve at the thought of you facing those days, but I've been in some of those where you weep sore and you don't know what to do. And those are the hours we learn to be still. And so this good preacher asked me a question about dealing with some of the feelings or emotions or whatever. And so I didn't answer right then. I waited, and I said, I'm going to get back to you. And then in 3 different times, I gave him some thoughts. And so I thought I'd give you those today. Just some things about handling the mental pressures, getting the mental and spiritual victory over depression, over worry. But several things. Number one, this is most obvious, but we neglect it, is count your blessings. Count your blessings. The song, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings. Look up. There's a roof over your head. Open the cupboards. Is there groceries? Open the refrigerator. Is it cold in there? Look in your feet. Are there shoes? Look out in the driveway. Is there a car? Do you have a bed? Are there blankets? Are there clean clothes in the closet? Look around. Do you have any family that loves you? Do you have a friend that loves you? Do you have a Bible? Do you have a church? Are you free? Are you living in America? Do you have a free country? At least sort of free. I mean, there's a bunch of people trying to take it from us. But for the moment, count your blessings. Can you hear? Can you see? Can you walk? Do you have a thumb so you can pick things up with your fingers? There's so much to be grateful for. And if your foot hurts, that means you have a foot, how good God is. And be thankful, number one. And I gave him some examples. And then number 2, I said focus on doing and not on the byproduct or the result. Because if we'll spend our life doing what we're supposed to do, God will take care of what needs to get done. God will, a farmer can't grow crops. All a farmer can do is cultivate and plow and plant, and some places has to water, some places fertilize and then harvest. But it's God who brings the fruit. And so that's kind of like the rest of life. If we will focus on doing what we're supposed to do, make it a big deal. I'm supposed to read my Bible. I'm supposed to take time in prayer. I'm supposed to be loving to my spouse. I'm supposed to be training my children the way they should go. I'm supposed to love my neighbor. I'm supposed to love God. I'm supposed to pay my bills. And there's all these things. Let's just focus on doing. See, if we do what we're supposed to do, the results are irrelevant. Because Joseph was a great man and he was a slave and thrown in prison. But the greatness of Joseph was found not in where he lived, but what he did while he lived there. Joseph did right in the dark hours. Daniel, same thing. Slave, the country conquered and carried away to another country, and all that Daniel went through. What did he do? He did right. He did the right thing. He did the right thing. He did the right thing. And that's so vital that we would do that, to just realize we need to do what we're supposed to, focus on what we do. Pay attention. Do what you're supposed to do. That is vital. And so don't worry about the results. Worry about the doing. Clean the house. Change the oil in the car. Mow the lawn. Whatever it is. I can't put fruit on my fruit trees, but I can thin the fruit when it starts growing. I can fertilize it. That's about all I do with my fruit trees. I water them. And I do before the fruit starts getting close to being ripe. I spray a fertilizer on all the outside of the tree, the branches and the leaves and things, and then I leave it to God. And we have such good fruit, citrus in the winter, and good fruit in the summer, peaches, apricots. But see, it's God who gives the increase. So focus on your job and let God do the product. So number one, count your blessings, and number two, focus on what you're supposed to do, and then third, focus on influencing somebody. Help somebody. It might be a widow down the street. It might be a couple that's a new couple at church you can befriend. It might be a little child you're holding in the nursery, and you're going to pray for that child's mom and dad. And maybe they're teaching a Sunday school class, or maybe they're newer in church. But take that child's name down and pray for them all week long. Write a note to the parents. Just want you to know, I've prayed for your little boy, little girl, every day this week. I was so honored to hold your child in the nursery. You don't think that would make an impression? You see, if we would try to touch one person's life, and sometimes pastors, if they don't see big massive crowds, they feel a failure. No. It was a little church that maybe had, ever had 50, maybe 70 at the most, but probably ran 30, 40, 50 people in it. And my wife went to it some, and I was never a member there, but it was a mechanic there who took some teenagers over to his house one Sunday night, because they didn't have a youth department, and he brought these teenagers over. His wife cooked him some cookies, and he didn't know what to do, so he pulled out a gospel tract and taught them how to witness and to share their faith with their public school friends. And one of those boys is who led me to Christ. Well, I'll tell you, that little church was pretty successful. That mechanic was pretty successful, because that mechanic touched one life, and that one life touched my life. And you know what? We don't know the dominoes down the road. Charles Spurgeon, late at night, terrible storm on a midweek service night. It's so bad storm the preacher didn't even get to church, but Spurgeon for some reason was out, and he walked into the back of that church, sat down in the back row, and the dozen or so people who made it to church were up front, and one of the deacons stood up and he preached, look to Jesus, look and live, about the brass serpent lifted up in the wilderness. And then how it was reflected back on from John chapter 3, as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so also must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And he said, a young man, he called him out. Here's a half dozen or dozen people that made it to church. There was one guy in the very back, teenage boy. He said, young man, look to Jesus. Charles Spurgeon walked the aisle and got saved that night. Preacher didn't even get to church. And, the one life, touch one life. Within a decade, he was the most famous pastor in the world, at least in the known world there. And he became the greatest read pastor as far as writing in Baptist circles ever. Unbelievable ministry. Started, just touch one life. Try to help somebody. Just make a difference. Just find a way to befriend somebody. I think ushers are so influential. Just shake a hand, look them in the eye, thank them for coming. Touch one life. and maybe a little kid in your Sunday school class, or maybe a child that rides a bus, maybe a child in the teen choir, and you pick that child out and you start praying for that child. Maybe you help pay a child's way to the Christian school, whatever it might be. So I said, number one, take time to count your blessings. Number two, focus on doing the right thing. Number three, focus on influencing one person. And then lastly, I did more, but these just for this morning, I'll do this. Number four, focus on getting close to God, getting to know God. And of course, it starts with Bible and prayer. Get prayer lists, multiple prayer lists, however it works for you. I've got back in the back little corner there, got prayer missionary cards I've had for decades. Some of them, the mom and dad and little kids are on this wall, and over here the little kids have grown, now they're missionaries, and I've got the kid on both walls. Pray, and maybe I've got a prayer list that pops up in the morning at 5:40 or 6:45, and another prayer list that pops up at 4 in the afternoon, staggering different lists each day, every alternating day. But however you pray, have a prayer list, and pray, and take time to pray for people. But then get to see how other people knew God. And I am sold on biographies. I don't know any great Christian who has not learned to devour biographies. And I wrote a list of names down here, just some people that might be of value. These are all missionaries. William Carey, David Livingston, Amy Carmichael, Jim Elliot, Mary Slessor, Adoniram Judson, Hudson Taylor, John and Betty Stam, Gladys Aylward, Jonathan and Rosalind Goforth. So many famous missionaries. You read their stories and you learn how they got to know God. Get to know God personally. Jesus didn't have a great big ministry, but he had something with God. And he made a difference in 11 lives. Judas betrayed him, but those 11, well, he changed those lives. And I sent these, and that pastor thanked me and thanked me for sending those in. And we all need encouragement. But he says, if you'll get your thinking controlled, the God of peace shall be with you. Philippians 4:9. Hey, thanks for joining us this morning. Probably went a little too long. I don't watch a clock. But good thing about the internet and YouTube and all and Rumble, you can just shut it off whenever you want and pick it back up next time. So I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us.